Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan. Welcome to today's video, another Aardvark reading vlog. These are some of my favorite videos to make. If you are not familiar with Aardvark Book Club, they are a subscription service very similar to Book of the Month. Every month on the first of the month, they release 5 book picks that they have curated and they offer you to pick one as your monthly pick. They send it to you. You can also add on additional books for a lower cost. This video is not sponsored by them. I pay for my own membership. I have done promotions with them in the past where I had my own promo code, but I only endorse it because I really do enjoy the service. I use it myself, like I said, and over the past few months, I have accumulated quite a few Aardvark picks that I am so excited to read. What I love about Aardvark is that they introduce me to books that I did not know I wanted to read. They have a lot of diversity in their picks, not only in author demographics, but also in the types of books and genres that they pick. It's not just the big name bestsellers. They post hints on their Instagram to hype up their picks before they're announced. And first of all, they're so fun to participate in, even though I don't know anything about what books they're talking about. But also in those, they usually give comparisons to other books or movies or TV shows that these books are like, and they always make me so interested to read the books. I have picked up some favorites through Aardvark, so hopefully this video will lead to the same thing. So let's talk about all the books that I have. I've got 5 of them that I will be reading for this video. They are kind of jumbled together. I don't remember exactly what month each of these correspond to, but they have all been picks within the last 3 months or so. So where to start? Maybe the one that I know the most about, or I had heard of and probably could have picked up if it weren't for Aardvark. It's The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding. This is a mystery thriller. I don't really know anything about it. It might be kind of a domestic thriller. I have read one other Robin Harding book, I think. Yeah, I read The Swap and I thought it was okay. I have actually seen some pretty good reviews for this book, so my hopes are high, but I will let you know what I think once I get to it. Another mystery thriller that I'll be reading in this video is called How Can I Help You by Laura Sims. This one is extremely short. I think it's less than 300 pages. It's less than 250 pages, which is very intriguing. I think this is a thriller that has to do with librarians. As you can see, this is a library card set on fire. So very intrigued to see what is all packed into this very short book. Speaking of short books, I think this is the most recent book that I picked, Death Valley by Melissa Broder. I went a little bit out on a limb with this pick. This doesn't really sound like a book that I will enjoy, but for some reason I was still intrigued. I think this is going to be a slower, more character-driven novel, but it does have a survival element to it because it is set in the California desert and she gets lost looking for a cactus or something like that. Also less than 250 pages, so definitely worth a shot. Then maybe the one that I am most intrigued about is called Bridge by Lauren Bukes. I have not heard of this book before. I haven't seen any reviews about it, but Aardvark's marketing of this book was very intriguing. It sounds like this is a sci-fi book that has to do with different dimensions or alternate realities, and I've had the most luck, honestly, with Aardvark's sci-fi picks. So I hope that this continues that trend. This is definitely the longest book on my list, over 400 pages. The spine is pretty cool and pretty, and I'm very excited to get into this one and find out what it's actually about. And then last but not least, another one that I kind of went out on a limb with, it's Learn by Heart by Emma Donoghue. I have read Room by this author. I did really enjoy it. I have seen the movie adaptation and I enjoyed it. She has written other books that I have not read, but I've seen very mixed to not great reviews for her other books. But because I enjoyed Room, I'm willing to give this author another chance. This cover is intriguing to me. Also, the synopsis sounded good. It says it's about 2 girls who fall secretly and dangerously in love at boarding school. So hopefully I have good luck with it. I do like to pick books a little bit outside of my comfort zone and that I haven't heard as much about through Aardvark, because I think one of the best benefits of subscription services like this is being introduced to books that are new to you and that you haven't heard of, because I know a lot of us on the bookish internet, we get inundated with the same marketing for the same books, the same hype, and I like to read hyped books as much as anyone else, but I also like to find hidden gems and recommend books that aren't getting as much hype. So my hope is that one of these 5 books at least I really enjoy and can recommend to other people, and then you could either add them to future Aardvark boxes if you are an Aardvark member, or you can just buy these books elsewhere because they're also published just like normal books. So that is the plan. I am going to get started. I've actually already started my first book. I have just barely started the audiobook of Death Valley. It is available on Scribd. Very short audiobook because it is a very short book. I'm gonna be doing some cleaning and organizing around my house today, so I should be able to finish this one pretty quickly. Once I finish it, I will give you a better synopsis because right now, it's a little bit abstract, it's a little bit strange. I want to make sure I actually grasp what's going on before I tell you what it's about. I'm not hating it, I'm just not sure where it's going. So I will be back once I have finished this first book. I will give you all of my thoughts and feelings and we will continue on with this probably pretty hefty video. All right, it is later the same day. My house is cleaner than it was. Is it clean? No, but we made progress and I will take that. We made more progress on the reading front because I finished Death Valley. Yes, it was short. The audiobook went really quickly and I am so surprised to say that I enjoyed this a lot because this is not at all my typical kind of book. This is very character driven, and it's not that I can never enjoy character driven novels, but I definitely prefer books that have a strong plot. This one has almost no plot, but I think the fact that it is short benefited it because I wasn't sitting there just waiting for something to happen. And I think it also helps that I really liked this main character. She is a little bit, I don't know, kind of quirky. She's in not a great situation. Her dad and her husband are both very sick. Her dad is actually in the hospital and she thinks he is nearing death imminently. So she's almost preemptively grieving him. And then also her husband is sick and he's getting worse. He's not in the hospital, but it's clear that he's declining rapidly. So she's kind of grappling with all of that, but she's also kind of running away from all of that. She finds herself in a hotel, in a Best Western specifically, in the middle of California. She's trying to decide, like, does she go to LA, which is where her dad is, to visit him in the hospital before he passes? Or should she go home to her husband? Or should she continue just wandering, trying to find peace or something? And for it being such a sorrow type of book, there's also kind of a lot of humor in it. This main character at the very beginning when she's checking into the hotel, she is making hilarious comments about the hotel. Best Westerns are her favorite chain of hotels, and she describes why, she describes what this hotel looks like, she describes her check-in experience. I really enjoyed kind of that initial time with her where we kind of got to see her personality, even though she is really struggling with what's going on in her life. It's like a little bit of her real personality was still seeping through. And then she decides to go hiking because she's in the middle of the desert and this area is really well known for its hiking. And she happens upon this cactus, which is where kind of the magical realism, fever dreamy element comes into this book because one, it's the type of cactus that doesn't normally exist in this area, and two, there is an opening in the cactus that she goes inside and then she starts seeing weird things. And I don't really think I need to spoil or talk about what she sees, but it just is very personal to her. It's very clear just everything that she's struggling with. It's weighing so hard on her mind, and whether this is something real she's going through or just something that her mind is making up as a coping mechanism doesn't really matter at the end of the day. And then I guess the other thing that happens is she ends up getting lost in this desert, and she continues seeing and experiencing things that we don't know if they're real or not. So it's a very interesting little book. I feel like I simultaneously have a lot to say about it and discuss about it, but also nothing because it was just so quick. But I liked it. Honestly, there's not really anything that I didn't like about it other than just the fact that I inherently don't like weird books. I don't know, I feel like this one worked as well for me as a weird book can. So I'm gonna give this book 4 stars. And if that premise sounds interesting to you, then I definitely think you should pick it up because it's short, it's a quick read, it is impactful, it's thought-provoking no matter what. So if it intrigues you, give it a try. If not, I understand that too, because this probably is a book that if I heard somebody else pitch it, I probably wouldn't pick it up. And I'm not even sure if I can confidently say if you typically have a similar reading taste to me and you normally wouldn't like this book, I don't know if you would surprisingly like this book either. I just know that I surprisingly liked this book. So I don't know, take that recommendation for what you will. I'm glad I read it. It's 4 stars. I'm glad to be starting this video off on a good note, and I'm ready to dive on into the next book. I don't know which one that's going to be yet, but I'll be back once I have an update on the next book that I end up reading. All right, hello friends. It is a couple of days later and I have a couple of Midway updates actually on some of the books that I'm reading. I am reading 2 books at once, which is not super typical of me, but one of them I am listening to the audiobook of and one of them I'm reading physically. So that's why usually if I am going to read 2 books at once, that is the reason why, and that's how I make progress on both of them. So let's start with the physical book. I was on sprints on Naomi's channel a couple of nights ago from Naomi's library, and while I was on those sprints, I started The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding. During those sprints, I got 93 pages into this, and I haven't read any more since then, but I was really enjoying it. This book starts off with a bang. We are following a woman who is homeless at the start of this book. She's living out of her car, and we quickly learn about what happened to her to put her in this situation. She has not always been homeless. She was actually really successful a couple of years ago. She was a chef and then she opened her own restaurant. She lived in New York City. The restaurant was doing fine, and then COVID-19 actually happened. And during that, her business failed and she lost everything. In order to start her restaurant, she had accepted investments from multiple people, but one of them was kind of a shady deal and she wasn't able to pay that investor back. And so he went after her. He told her he was going to smash one of her fingers every week until she paid him back the money. And after one time getting a finger smashed, she decided she would rather drop everything, go on the run, and basically live in fear of this person. So that's what she's doing now. She has fled New York. She now lives on the West Coast. She works for under the table money and she just tries to live under the radar. She's just trying to make it by. And then one day when she is sleeping in her car, she's woken up by something. She ends up meeting this woman who is seemingly in an equally desperate situation. And they, I wouldn't really say strike up a relationship or a friendship, but they get to know each other more and then the story goes from there. I'm really excited to keep reading this book and to see where it goes. So far, I wouldn't say it's overly thrilling, but it's definitely intriguing and I can see how the thriller element could be ramped up. So yeah, really enjoying this. And as soon as I get the time to sit down and read this more physically, I am going to do that and assumedly fly through the rest of it. The other one that I've started, I went ahead and spent a credit on Libro FM to get the audiobook. It is Bridge by Lauren Bukes, and so far I am 26% of the way through this book, which must be around 100 pages or so. This one has been a little bit harder to understand, a little bit harder to get into. We are following this woman named Bridge who has recently lost her mother, so she is grieving that loss, and she's found something in her mother's possession that is reminding her of these experiences she had when she was younger with her mom, of them seemingly traveling to alternate dimensions and like traveling to these lives where they have families and lives that are not their normal life. And so she's trying to figure out more about her mom. Her mom was some kind of like scientist or something. So she made this discovery and she's just trying to dig more into it. I don't know, I wish I knew a little bit more about it than that, but that's what I've gathered so far. She's got a group of friends that seem really nice and like they're going to work well together to figure things out. So I'm just gonna continue on with this ride. I actually tonight am doing some cozy nighttime reading sprints with my patrons on the highest tier. I especially like for these sprints to feature some kind of cozy hobby or something while I listen to an audiobook. So I think tonight I'm going to be decorating the canvases that I have behind my desk here in my office, and I'm going to do that while continuing to listen to this book. So I will provide some b-roll of that. That's what I'll be doing tonight. And probably the next time I check in will be me giving more of an update on this book, whether I finished it, what my final thoughts are. All right, my friends, I have two updates on the two books I was reading. One of them I have finished, and one of them I have decided to DNF. If you follow me on Goodreads, you probably know which one that is, or if you've seen me on sprints lately, because I do think I've talked about both of these. But should we start with the good news or the bad news? Let's start with the disappointing news, which is that I DNF'd Bridge. Let me remind myself how far I was into the book. I was quite a ways. I was 66% of the way through this book and I was listening to the audiobook. So could I have just put it on and pushed through listening to the rest of it? Yeah, I could have, but the thought of reading it was not bringing me joy. The story was not keeping me interested. And this is a pretty long book, so I still had a substantial way to go and I don't want to finish it. And I don't really have a good reason why. On the surface, this does seem like a book I would like. As I've mentioned, Aardvark has picked sci-fi books that I've loved in the past. They've also picked a couple that haven't worked for me, so I accept that there's a little bit of a risk there when I choose to take Aardvark's sci-fi recommendations. This is unfortunately just another one that did not work for me. What it comes down to is that the story was just confusing enough that I lost all interest. I think the key to a great sci-fi book is making you confused, but making sure that you understand enough to stay interested to get to the end when all is explained. This one really just lost me. I think a big part of it is because there are many points of view in here. We mostly get Bridge, who is the main character, whose mom has passed away. She's learning things about her mom. She's learning how to take this drug in the book to travel to the alternate realities. She slips into alternate versions of her life, which are very different. And this book is interesting. Well, let me get back to that. So we get Bridge for most of it. We also get Bridge's friend Dom's point of view So they're giving like the outsider perspective of Bridget's experience. And then we also get diary entries from Bridget's mom, Jo, from obviously before she passed away. She also is traveling to many other realities and writing down her experiences. And then we also get at least one other one. So it just gets confusing because when these characters slip into their alternate realities, they sometimes, it feels like, get stuck in that, and vice versa. So like the real world Bridge will get swapped out for someone else who doesn't know what's going on. So then all the characters around them are like, who are you? Where is my actual friend stuck? How do I get them switched back? It's very confusing keeping all of the characters straight, all of the different realities straight, all of the timelines straight. And at the point that I was in the book, I'm not really sure what the point of the story was. I'm not sure what exactly they were trying to solve other than to understand this whole situation, but it seems pretty ununderstandable. So I don't know. I am unfortunately not going to finish it because I just don't care that much. I did look at some Goodreads reviews and they're not great overall, so I don't think I'm missing anything outstanding. So I'm gonna put it down. It was a valiant effort, but just not for me. However, to turn that around into some good news, I finished The Drowning Woman and I really enjoyed The Drowning Woman. I think I explained the initial setup of this book, and I do think once you know that, you don't need to know much else about it before you go in. It is somewhat of a standard domestic thriller, and I've really gone on a roller coaster with domestic thrillers. I started out my reading journey loving them. That's pretty much all I consumed when I first got back into books as an adult, and then I very quickly burned out on them. They all felt just so repetitive. It felt like I was reading the same tropes and the same twists, and I didn't care for the domestic drama that I was reading about, so I kind of stopped reading them for a while. And now I've started sprinkling them back in, but I'm very conscious about how many I read at a time because I don't want to get burned out on them again. And I think I've found the right balance because this one, I like that I've read a number of other domestic thrillers because I can recognize the tropes that this is playing on, but I can also recognize that this is doing something just a little bit different from the ones that I've read, at least so far. So with all that said, I'm giving it 4 stars. I don't think it's like the most mind-blowing, groundbreaking, life-changing thriller ever. I don't think most domestic thrillers can be, but for what it is, I think it did it well. It kept me entertained the entire time. Pretty much whenever I wasn't reading this book, I was thinking about getting back to it, and I enjoyed the twists and turns along the way. I would recommend this to fans of The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine and The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, but I will say again that this is kind of a twist on the trope that those 2 books have in common. Sometimes it gets a little spoilery when you recommend, domestic thrillers if you liked other domestic thrillers. And so I hope I'm not doing that, but again, it's not exactly like those. It's just a little bit of a twist on those tropes. And so if you enjoyed them and want to read more like that, but not necessarily something where you know exactly what's gonna happen, maybe you should check this one out. So I am really glad that I enjoyed that book. I've got 2 4 stars and a DNF. So I'm gonna get right on into the next book. I will be back once I have my next update because I've only got 2 books left for this video. All right, you guys, I have my next update. I have finished Learn by Heart by Emma Donoghue. And apologies that I did not come on with a Midway update, but it's mostly because I just wasn't having a great time reading this book. This is a historical fiction book that is very historical. It takes place in the early 1800s. It takes place at this boarding school in England, and we're following the story of these 2 characters, these 2 girls who are at this boarding school who ultimately fall in love. And I'm not sure exactly what didn't click with this book. I think it's a combination of the different elements of it. First of all, 1800s. For some reason, very hard for me to visualize and like contextualize. Maybe that's a sign that I actually need to read more from that time period. But because it's just so unfamiliar to me, the setting in general just felt very abstract. The situation that these girls are in is very sad. The reasons that they're at this boarding school are not good reasons. So they've experienced trauma, they've experienced hardship. The boarding school itself is not great conditions. There are a lot of rules placed upon them, and all of the characters at the school are kind of miserable, and it's sad seeing a relationship form out of misery. And I suppose it's somewhat realistic, and of course it happens, but it's just very sad and desperate feeling that these girls can only cling to each other because everything else around them is just so dire. And then the last thing I'll say that didn't really work for me is that there are many intimate moments about these girls together that I felt just a little bit uncomfortable reading because they are 14 years old. I am not really interested in reading intimate scenes of anybody underaged, no matter what situation it is, no matter what their genders are or what their relationship is like. It's just not really a place I want to be. Again, not that it's unrealistic necessarily, or that these feelings of love aren't valid. I just, as a full-grown adult, would not choose to read intimate moments between 14-year-old girls. I don't know, but yeah, I guess I wouldn't say there's nothing, like the writing style wasn't bad, the story wasn't inherently bad, it just was slow moving, it was sad, there was not much of a plot, there was a lot of intimacy in the second half of this book between the girls, and I just did not enjoy my reading experience of it. So I'm unfortunately going to give it 2 stars. I wouldn't not recommend it to anyone who hears all of those things and thinks that it is a book for them. I just don't know if a lot of my viewers are going to have that very particular taste. So I guess this is my way of vetting it for you in case you read Room and wanted a similar, little bit more suspenseful of a book. This is not that. So unfortunately 2 stars, but moving on to the last book for this video, How Can I Help You? I did start this book last night. I don't have it to hold it up physically. I think it's upstairs in my room. I read about 50 pages and they went by really quickly, and the book itself is only a little bit over 200 pages. So I'm gonna get through it really quickly. The main character in this one is very intriguing. She works at a library, but previously she was a nurse with some very questionable intentions. And she did some very questionable things to her former patients. It sounds like some not great things happened with her old coworker slash friend. And so now she has shifted careers, now works at a library. She's kind of conned her way into this job, and she has questionable feelings and intentions about her patrons at the library. And now she has this new coworker who reminds her of her old coworker. And so something's gonna happen with them. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not even sure exactly what she did at her old job. She seems to have this fascination with death. I'm not sure if that means she killed people or if she just reveled in watching people die, which she saw a lot of as a nurse, specifically in the ICU. So yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of questions, but I'm interested to find out the answers. And I'm very interested to see how this book does that with only 150 more pages, because it feels like I just started and it's gonna have to explain and wrap things up pretty quickly. So yeah, I'll be back once I have finished that last book, can give you my final rating and review, and we can wrap this video up. All right, I finished the last book, How Can I Help You? I did indeed fly through this as I thought I would. Very short, very quick to read. I unfortunately didn't love it. When I came to you after the first 50 pages, I was very intrigued at where the story was going. At that point, I had only read one perspective, but later on in the book, we do get the other perspective of the main woman working in this library. And this whole book felt like it was building and building towards something interesting. Unfortunately, that interesting thing just never happened. The revealing of like who these characters are and what they know about each other was revealed in a very slow way, given how short the book is. And yet not, I don't know, not in a very suspenseful way to where we get to the end and there's nothing left to be surprised about. And the book kind of tries to have what I think is supposed to be a climactic ending, but really isn't, because it's not surprising at all given everything we learn about these characters and their pasts. I don't know. I was looking at the blurbs on the back of the book, which, first of all, okay, this is not her debut novel, so these could be talking about other books of hers, or I think she has one other novel, but she also has essays. And I don't know, an utterly beguiling cat and mouse thriller? I don't really agree. No one writes about obsession like Laura Sims. I see the obsession she's talking about, but that's not the main takeaway I took from the book. An insidiously readable psychological trap set by and for its two unforgettable and unforgiving protagonists. A deadly web of intrigue, a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. I don't know, you guys, it just didn't feel like that to me. It just felt like a very, very slow burn history of these two characters. My interest and entertainment started high at the beginning of the book and just was on a steady decline down, which is not how you want your reader to feel reading a book. So ultimately I feel dissatisfied, I'm underwhelmed, I'm disappointed. I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I will say, actually, I just remembered, I wrote in my Goodreads review that this book does feel similar to a couple of Samantha Downing's books, My Lovely Wife and For Your Own Good. I did not like either of those books. I gave them both 2 stars. They felt equally slow, boring, anticlimactic. And also Jane Doe by Victoria Helen Stone is about a female serial killer, kind of, but also boring. This falls in that realm. I don't know, I think it was supposed to feel suspenseful. It was supposed to give like good for her vibes, but it just didn't. So disappointing, 2 stars. To wrap up this video, we had quite a range of experiences. If I were going to rapid fire rank the books that I read, at the bottom would have to be the one I DNF'd. It would have to be Bridge. Then I think the one that I next enjoyed the least is the Emma Donoghue Learned by Heart. Then on top of that would be the other 2-star, How Can I Help You? No 3 stars in this video, and I did have 2 4 stars, which I am happy about. My second most favorite book is probably Death Valley, definitely outside of my comfort zone, and I'm glad I read it. It was the one I was the most pleasantly surprised by. Did give it 4 stars. And then my favorite of the video is not necessarily a surprise. It is in my comfort genre, but I am happy that it lived up to expectations. So The Drowning Woman by Robin Harding with 4 stars is my favorite of the video. This is the overall ranking. Please let me know if you have read any of these books that I've talked about and what your thoughts were, or let me know if I have convinced you or now not convinced you to pick any of these up. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.